So welcome everybody, it's absolutely lovely to see you all. Firstly, before we get started, I just wanted to give a huge thanks to Sarah and to Maren from Craft Festival for giving us this space and allowing us to come together. It's an amazing thing that Sarah's doing. I know I can see her, I know she's here, so it's an amazing thing that you're doing, and you know, I know personally I'm really appreciative that you've been able to give us this space. Obviously it's a craft festival as well as a kind of fitness space, so remember to buy lots of stuff. Years ago I used to have a shop, and it was a very small shop, but it really gave me an appreciation of shopping small and shopping local. So, you know, the pair of socks or the blanket or whatever it is that you can buy really helps them out. I can't emphasize that enough. So once we're done, then go and have a look and see all the fantastic crafters, and if you can invest, then that would be amazing. So I just want to introduce myself. I'm seeing quite a few familiar faces here actually, which is fantastic. So I'm Nikki, and I've had a running shop for about 10 years and an events company for about the same time. And we did lots and lots of training plans and lots of talking people through training for running events. And so that's where my information is coming from today. It's all that experience. We had an opportunity to talk to thousands and thousands of people. So in effect, you're getting the benefit of that cumulative information that we've managed to gather. But I have a cohort today who's there. So this is Grant. And he's going to be having some input as well. Grant is my husband, but he's also, you know, been invested. He's a personal trainer and he's been invested in fitness for a very long time. So between the two of us, we are going to share our collective wisdom to you today. We've got a little bit of experience of going long. So between the two of us, we think we've done about 35 marathons. I think probably 5 Ironmans and 3 ultras. So we've dabbled a little bit in going long. It kind of comes with a bit of a health warning, because when you do go long, you either do it once or you do it all of the time. So you kind of have to be aware of that. Once you start to go longer, it can be a bit addictive. So that kind of comes with a bit of a health warning. So we're going to talk a little while about principles of training. We're going to look at some training plans, because I think, you know, there's a lot of information out there, but they seem to be written in gobbledygook. So we're going to look at some training plans and try and unpick them and see what they mean. We're going to be looking at psychological training, because that's a really big aspect of going longer that people either ignore or don't think about in the first place. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about why, because that's a really important question for you to ask yourself. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about motivation, maybe target races, and we'll talk about what it looks like when you're actually doing it. If there's anything else that you want to talk about, then please do pop it into the chat and we can pick it up. But first of all, I kind of wanted you all to unmute, and if you're happy to, just let me know what kind of distances you're looking at doing next. So what kind of thing in your mind you're thinking about training for. So would anybody like to kind of open the floor on that?
Okay, that's right. Hi, my name's Adam O'Reilly and I am based in London. I've got a couple of things to do this year. One is the big half in August, which got postponed from April. A friend of mine recommended I do that before I get into the London Marathon in 2022.
Cool, so you got half marathon and marathon coming up, big half. Yes. And was it London, Adam?
London Marathon.
London Marathon, okay, brilliant, thank you. Okay, so we are going to be talking a little bit about marathon training, and everything that we talk about today will apply to that. So brilliant, thanks for sharing that. Anybody else want to share?
Yeah.
Hi, Mike.
Hi, all right.
I'm good. For you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. A bit tired today. Yeah, I've been doing a bit of running, but it's all fairly low distance, but I'm training for the London, so training through summer as well, which is going to be scary.
Brilliant. Yes, we'll if I don't talk about that, prompt me later and I'll talk a little bit in about that, but brilliant, thanks for sharing. Anybody else? Sue, yep.
So my running buddy is on here actually, and we're part of a running club, which obviously hasn't been running together for ages now. So we tend to run sort of 3 times a week, perhaps averaging sort of 4 to 6 miles. We sort of banged out 10 the other week, but it is just sort of getting the consistency over sort of 10k, keeping that going without injury, and trying to sort of get up to, well, I quite like to sort of easily sort of go 7-8 miles without sort of feeling sore, and managing to sort of keep that distance as quite doable. I mean, a couple of years ago when we were sort of with the running club regularly, then we'd run 6 miles every session. So it is just sort of just keeping the distance up, and sometimes it's just easy to sort of drop out and lose interest and lose momentum. So it is just sort of trying to keep it going. I guess that's sort of generally what I need help with.
All right, brilliant. Thank you, Sue. Anybody else want to share?
I'm only just starting, so just doing very short distances.
Yeah.
But I quite like the idea of going fell running.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, but I manage the fitness element. I struggle with the mental element of keeping going and keeping motivation up.
Okay. What is it about fell running that attracts you?
Oh, just being outside. Like we walk a lot, and just being out there is much nicer than running around the streets. It's boring.
Yeah, no, I hear you. All right, brilliant. Super, thank you for that. Anybody else want to share their targets?
Hi, Nikki.
Hi,
I'm on the couch. I'm kind of right, I'm right at the basic. My problem, a bit of my problem is I'm a swimmer, and I struggle with running because I'm like fantastic in the water. I can swim for hours and lengths, but I find the weight distribution and where I've put on weight, I'm a bit worried about starting up running again with the like joints and everything. And I just want some sort of gentle program, I suppose, to get from couch to out the door.
Okay.
And motivated to do that, because at the moment I'm still waiting for the pools to open.
Yes, motivation's a big one, isn't it? We'll put a little bit more about that in when we get to that point. Thank you for that, Cass.
Thanks.
Anybody else want to share their goals? No? Okay, brilliant. Well, obviously you can ask questions at any point. Please do put them in the chat, or just kind of wave your arm about and we'll see you and we can bring you in. There's a really good range there, so we are literally looking at couch to marathon. But the good thing about running generally is that the training plans will apply to any distance. What I always say when I start these sessions is that actually running is much more psychological than physiological. What that means is that any of you sat here in front of me would be able to run a marathon tomorrow if you had to, if you had a compelling enough reason. So if somebody in your family was in danger and you had to save their life, for example, it's a bit extreme. But that kind of motivation is enough for you to be able to get off the couch and cover 26 miles and probably do it quite easily. And in effect, what we're doing is we're finding a motivation, we're finding a reason to do what it is that we want to do. And the training aspect of that actually is about making it feel more comfortable. So a lot of the training that we do, whether you're starting on the couch or whether you're comfortably around 10 miles and want to go longer, actually the training is about convincing your head it's a good idea. And so that's why mental training is really, really important. But from a physiological aspect, from a physical aspect, you all have the ability to do it. You know, running is a very natural thing, and it's what we're designed to do. It's what our history tells us that we have been able to do in the past. And all we're really doing now is trying to combat a sedentary lifestyle, because unfortunately these days a lot of us spend so much time sitting down, and myself included. And that actually can undo quite a lot of the really good work that we do. So fundamentally what we're looking at is motivation, but we're also looking at momentum. And a lot of these training programs are designed to kind of build a habit in. So what you were saying, Sue, you know, you've moved on screen, there you are. So what you were saying, Sue, about, you know, actually it's trying to build that momentum up to keep going. And that can often be the hardest thing. I've got some references that I'm going to post in the chat in a little while. And I will post a reference from James Clear, because He has written a book called Atomic Habits, and he's got quite a big fitness background, and he's really good at kind of trying to break down that kind of motivational aspect. And in essence, it's about making it as easy as possible for you so that you haven't got any barriers in place to get out of the door. And that can be something as simple as putting your shoes next to the door or putting your running clothes next to the bed so that when you fall out of bed, you fall into your running clothes and get going. But are you going to talk a little bit more about that later?
We can do.
Okay, brilliant. So we will cover that a little bit later on. Firstly, I wanted to talk about the principles of training, and principles of training will apply to you whatever distance that you're running. We work on an acronym called FIT, and FIT refers to frequency, intensity, time, and type, and that acronym basically applies to any kind of fitness that you're trying to do, whether you're either trying to run or you're trying to weight train or whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. And it's our building block for whatever our goal is, whatever our target is. It's the thing that we start off with first. So it's been around for quite a long time, and in essence, the kind of design behind it is in order for you to achieve what's also called the overload principle. So the overload principle states that in order for you to get fitter, you have to test your body in a way that it's not used to. So you have to increase the amount of training that you're doing so that in essence, actually a little bit of damage is caused to the muscles in order for them to heal themselves, and then you're stronger the next time you go out. And that's an incredibly simplistic way of looking at it. And the overload principle itself is quite a difficult one to kind of gauge sometimes, because of course, if you don't get it right, you end up in the injury zone. So in this constant kind of training parallel, what we want to do is overload our body sufficiently that it adapts to whatever it is that we're doing. It adapts to that training and you get fitter or stronger, but you don't fall over that injury line. And we talk about the injury line a lot, because obviously if you fall over that line and into injury, then that can hamper your training quite a lot and obviously can cause some problems. And it's a different line for everybody. So when we're talking about these training programs and we're talking about the principles of training, we will always err on the side of safety, because we don't want you to fall into that injury. But it also relies on you to kind of monitor how your body's feeling when you're going through the training program, and having the bravery and the ability to adapt if you feel that niggles and problems are starting to develop. And that in itself takes practice too. But one of the things that, and one of the things that we're going to kind of try and blow out of the water today is this element of no pain, no gain. You know, this has been a thing that's been around for a lot of years, and I still hear it quoted quite a lot. I'm really hot. Can you turn the heat on? Yeah. Sorry, the heating's on. I'm dying here. It's really, really hot. Sorry about that. And so this kind of no pain, no gain thing kind of will rule and will dominate quite a lot of how people approach their training. And I spend a lot of my time actually convincing people that that might not be a really good idea. And so I guess, I mean, through Secret Run Club, which is the running club that we have running at the moment, that kind of partly explains why we have a mantra of be more tortoise, because of the no pain, no gain kind of mantra, people think that when they approach a running program, that it kind of has to hurt a little bit, and that it kind of has to feel really torturous and it has to be really hard. But actually, in terms of motivation, that can be really, really difficult, because if you have to go out and face a really tough session every session, you're not going to want to go out because you're going to be much more comfortable sat on the couch. And that's where it can become really, really difficult for you to kind of find that balance. And unless, you know, some people are really motivated by pain and really motivated by time and really motivated by achieving the best that they can possibly achieve every single time. And I get that. But for the most of us, you know, those people go on to be Paula Radcliffe. For the most of us, you know, we need to make this thing as easy as we possibly can. And so when we approach this frequency, intensity, time and type, then what I would encourage you to do is try and make it as easy as you possibly can for yourself, because that in essence in itself is going to make it much more doable for you, and that will help with that motivational aspect. And that can even be something like, you know, if you're not feeling it, then just go out for a 5-minute walk. Just promise yourself that's all you're going to do. Put your shoes on, get out the door, go for a 5-minute walk, and the chances are that actually once you're out there, you'll complete the session that was set for that particular day, because the hardest part often is getting out of the door. And I think a lot of that does come back to this no pain no gain thing. So so it's about making it as easy as possible for yourself. In terms of applying fit to running, it really depends on your fitness level and your injury level, so where that injury line is. And in some respects, this is going to take a little bit of trial and error. In terms of frequency, what we would say is that in order to maintain any fitness that you have, you would kind of do that particular exercise twice a week. So that's going to give you a good enough base to kind of keep the fitness that you have. And that also applies for, and I'm speaking about myself here, when you get to a certain age, and actually that age for running, I think, tends to be around about 40. Even just that twice a week, actually, you get a net gain, because not only are you maintaining the fitness that you have, you're preventing any degenerative fitness that happens. And actually, that's probably true with strength training as well. But in order for you to start increasing your fitness, then really we need to look at 3 times a week. So if you're looking to start running, or if you're looking to run longer, then the minimum really that you need to look at is 3 times a week. Intensity is a really interesting one, and actually what I'll do, if I can just post this into our chat. This is a really interesting TED talk by a chap called Stephen Seeler, and what he does is he talks about cardiovascular training, so run training, ski training, etc., and how elite athletes approach their training. And what he was really fascinated about was that actually elite athletes, when they're training, will generally approach their training at a very low level. So they might do a reasonable amount of mileage. You know, Paula Radcliffe would do possibly 100 miles a week. Certainly in the run up to Olympics, for example, would be a little bit more than that. But a lot of that training would be done at sub-maximal level. So if you give yourself a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 is sat on the couch and 10 is absolutely flat out, then she would probably run quite a lot of that training around about 6, so a conversational pace. So when we start our beginners groups, that's why we have this rule at the bottom that always states, whenever you go out for a run, you've got to go out at conversational pace. Because it's very difficult to build mileage and to build speed at the same time. When you try and build both of those at the same time, that's where you really significantly increase your injury risk. So it's really, if you're looking to increase your distance, then it's much more important to focus on increasing the distance than worrying about the speed, which is why there's been more tortoise and running at 6 out of 10 rather than up in the 8 or 9 out of 10. Conversational pace is really, really important, because fundamentally that's around improving your physiology, so giving your breathing and giving your body that time it needs in order to be able to adapt properly. It's about making it feel more comfortable, so from a motivational perspective, you're able to feel like you can go out and do it again. But it's also about injury risk as well. Does that kind of make sense? So in terms of intensity, if you look at your mileage for a week, and it doesn't matter if you're a beginner runner, you would expect in the first week probably to cover somewhere around about 4.5 miles on a run-walk basis. Up to marathon distance, you're going to be looking at probably starting out on a program maybe 15 miles a week, and that might build up to 30 for the normal person. If you're looking at getting a good fridge for London, you might go up to the 50s, 60s. If you're Paula Radcliffe, you'd be up in the hundreds. So that kind of gives you the idea of the scale of training. For marathon distance, but at the very beginner, 4.5 miles a week is a really good thing. Then it's really important out of all of that distance to focus on at least 80% of that training at conversational pace. And often what tends to happen when people go out, and particularly the more established runners, or even the beginners actually, when people go out, they tend to run at a pace because of the no pain, no gain thing that kind of takes them out of their comfort zone, out of breath, but kind of fast enough, slow enough for them to be able to sustain for whatever it is the length of the session. And then what happens is that you end up starting to do all of your runs at the same pace. And those of you that are more established, those of you that have got a Strava account, go back and have a look at your Strava account and go back and have a look at the pace that you're running. And this is particularly common for people training for 10 miles, half marathon, marathon. Is that actually what happens is that you spend all of your time running at a pace that's tough, that doesn't necessarily give the body enough time to recover, but doesn't give any variation in terms of speed either. And it's a very common trap that people fall into. So we're going to be looking at training programs in a little while and picking them out a little bit. But the really important thing is to vary your training as much as possible, but don't put lots and lots of stuff in at the high end. Try and keep it more at the low end. And if you find that a little bit tough and a little bit tedious, sometimes people do. People prefer to feel that, you know, when you get back, you feel a bit kind of like you've done a session. Then the easiest way to kind of make it a little bit harder for yourself is to put hills in. And that's why we say hills of friends, because it's a really nice way of putting intensity into a session without killing yourself and without killing your body as well. And it lowers your injury risk too. So if you feel like you do need to mix it up, that's a really nice way of doing it. Does that kind of make sense? In terms of time then, it will vary depending on what you're trying to achieve. And we'll look at that in a little bit more depth when we look at the training program. And in terms of type, cardiovascular training is specific. So if you want to run a marathon, there's absolutely no point spending your entire time cycling a bike, because they're very specific in the way that they work cardiovascularly and in the way they work physiologically. There is a bit of cross training. So if you're the kind of person who does get injured a lot, and you want to train for a marathon, for example, you'll need to do your 3 times a week for your run, but you can get a lot of benefit from putting things like high intensity spin sessions in there, you know, going for long bike rides, swimming to a lesser extent, although you will get a breathing benefit. Weight training is a really important one to put in terms of cross training, because that will help build the blocks that enable you to hold good form when you're running. So it is important to kind of mix it up a little bit, but it's also really, really important that you focus on the thing that you're trying to do. So if you want to become a better runner, you have to run. There's no way around that. Sorry about that. So let's just have a look at a training program quickly. So I'm just going to share my screen. There we are. All right, can you see that? Just give me a thumbs up. Yeah, okay, brilliant, thank you. So let's have a look at a marathon training program first. And remember, it doesn't matter if you're a beginner or a marathon runner, you know, these principles will apply. So this is a 4:15, so 4:15 marathon training program. And what I wanted to do to use this is just kind of give you an idea of what a training program actually looks like. So if we look at week 1, which is this bit here, what you'll see in this particular program, they've got people running 2, 3, 4, 5, sort of 6 times a week, which is quite a big deal actually. I mean, 6 times a week is certainly going to increase your risk of injury if you haven't done much running or you haven't done much moving. I'm not necessarily.
Sorry, stop you. It's not showing up on the screen. It's just, has everyone else got it? I haven't got it.
I can't see it either.
Okay.
I can't see it either, Nikki.
You can just see a folder with the...
Yeah, there's the folders that showed up. Just maybe double click on it maybe.
Yeah, no, I did that, but let's see. Have you got that?
No.
Just seeing that one window, your folder window, rather than the actual thing.
Can I'll maybe make you host?
I wonder if it's because it's a PDF. Can you see that?
No, it's just your files.
All right.
Screen.
Yeah.
You close it and open it again. Maybe.
Yeah, I'll try that. Okay, let me try that again. Can you see that?
No.
No, it's still your files.
Try and share just that to close that.
Yeah.
Give it share screen. and pick, if you've got that open somewhere.
You have to select the right screen to share in Zoom.
So open that and then share that.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. Sorry, it's not there. Sorry about this. There won't be a second. If it's not going to work, then we'll do something else.
Cass, have you got some advice there? Sorry, did you say?
Yeah, I was just saying you have to click on the actual screen. So you're changing screens from the screen you're in, the folder one. When the Zoom window pops up, you'll get about 6 different windows, depending on how many browsers you've got open. You'll have to click on the one with the running program in it. So you have to select that running program screen. Yeah, there you go.
There we
Well
go.
done.
Okay, brilliant.
Thank you, Cass.
You can come and sit here
You
next.
Zoom a lot.
So let's go back to week 1 then. So I'm not necessarily advocating that this is the right training plan, but what I wanted to do, just kind of go through what it looks like, so that in theory you can go away and have a look at any training plan and assess whether or not it's for you. So after the week 1 in brackets is the mileage. So this week 1 is 24 miles. Now, the first thing I would say is that if you're looking for a marathon training program or any training program, for example, and you're not already doing 24 miles, this is not the right program for you. So when you start on week 1, you need to look at whether or not it marries up with where you are. And if you're looking at training for marathon, for the guys who are looking at that, then before you start a marathon training program, I would suggest that you at least need to be able to cover 10k comfortably, but actually probably a better target would be 10 miles. So if you're training for London Marathon, for example, you need to kind of target getting to 10 miles by the end of the year before you go into a marathon training program. And most marathon training programs are 16 weeks. So generally, if you start in January, the very beginning of January, that will take you up to London Marathon if it's in April. But of course, things have changed, and recently it's been October. So you kind of need to work back 16 weeks from I think it's the 4th of October this year, isn't it? And I can't do the maths right now, but you can kind of just get a calendar out, work it backwards. And you kind of need to be around about at least 10k, but ideally 10 miles at that point. So this is training 6 days a week, and this is quite a hefty training schedule actually. And normally I wouldn't recommend people run 6 days a week if they're training for anything at any distance. Like I said, the kind of minimum you would look at is 3. In an ideal world, you would look at 3 to 5. If you're more prone to injury, you would stay with the 3 and do some cross training. If you're less injury prone, then 5 days a week is fine, as long as you can fit the time in, of course. But what you'll see here is that in week 1, so they've got on Monday 3 miles, 30 minutes easy. So they're telling you that you're running at 10-minute mile pace. And that easy should be on that scale kind of 5 or 6 out of 10. The next one they're anticipating, because this is a 4:15 program, that you're running slightly quicker. So you're running at 28 minutes. So I suppose the 3 miles at 30 minutes will be quite easy. So what you see is they do kind of vary the pace up here a little bit. So Monday we've got an easy run, a nice gentle run. Tuesday we've got a race pace run, which I wouldn't necessarily put in on week 1, but there you go. Well, Wednesday's steady. So what does steady mean? Well, steady state means that you're going to be running it around about 7 out of 10 rather than your 5 to 6. So if our easy pace is conversational, where you're able to have a conversation really quite nicely, then steady would be you're able to speak, but it might be slightly more chopped sentences. So you're not able to have a flowing conversation, but you can kind of blurt words out at whoever's running next to you. Thursday we've got a 2 miles at 10k pace, which is quite speedy. So again, we go from easy to race pace to tempo to fast, rest, hills, and then easy. So this kind of goes against what I was saying in terms of 80% of your mileage should be in that conversational pace, because this clearly isn't. And I guess that I was trying to make really, in terms of in the industry and running generally, we've still got this no pain, no gain mentality. And so you kind of have to be a little bit wary when you go around and you pick up a training program about what it's actually asking you to do, because you know that's quite a hefty training program, even for somebody who's got the ability to run a marathon in 4 hours and 15 minutes. Has anybody got any questions on that? I can't see all of you necessarily because I'm sharing my screen.
So Nikki,
Yeah, go on.
so on here, I mean, Monday, I know you said this was like for marathon training, but 3 miles at 30 minutes, easy.
Yeah.
I mean, that's quite a fast pace. That's 10-minute miles, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so I guess you're going on to show us sort of another example of something not quite so fast, because that would be really hard to achieve. I mean, I'm not getting towards a marathon. I mean, half marathon would be good, but even so, that intensity is just way up there.
Yeah, and this is the kind of the issue I have with this, and particularly for people like Cass, for example, who's just on the couch starting out. When you look at this perception of what being a marathon runner is, it creates this feeling of superhero almost, and it almost becomes undoable. And so it's kind of what I'm trying to say to you all here is that anybody can, I mean, literally anybody could do a marathon if they wanted to. If you had that why, you could. But what you need to do is kind of scale it down. So we are going to look, assuming that I can do this properly. So I'm going to share my screen again. This is Nikki's training program I'm going to pull up here. Just bear with me a second. It's not there yet, is it? There we are. You have to kind of come in again. So this is Nikki's training program, and that looks a little bit friendlier, I hope, no matter what kind of level that you're working at. So the best way to approach this, no matter whether you're on the couch or whether you're training for marathon, I think, is to first of all work out how many times a week that you can run. And this is based on 4 days a week. Yeah, so we satisfy our 3 to improve, but we're not going to kill ourselves. And if you're already running, if you can already do kind of 3 miles comfortably, then this is the perfect one for you. If you're on the couch like Kaz, then what you need to do is bring it down to start at a mile. And there are lots of programs out there that you can start with. So Couch to 5K is a really good one, but you bring it down even further. But this is for somebody who's, assuming that people are already running and they can comfortably cover 3 miles. This is exactly where you would start. So your first session, and it doesn't necessarily matter where you put that Monday or Tuesday, is generally 3 miles slow. And that is that conversational pace again. So we go back to that 5 or 6 out of 10. And that pace is whatever that pace is for you. And the important thing is to monitor to make sure that you're doing it at a conversational pace. You put a rest in the middle of that where you might do some strength or Pilates or stretching, yoga, whatever, it doesn't matter, but do something that involves kind of strength and conditioning. And then the next run is also, you maybe start at 3 miles. And if you want to inject a little bit of pace in there or a little bit of more difficulty, then you add some hills into that just to make it a little bit more challenging. You start at 3, but again, you try and do it at conversational pace. You put another rest in, and then when parkrun's back up and running, if you want a little bit of speed work in there, you might chuck parkrun in on a Saturday morning, which is a 3 mile time trial in effect, run all over the country. They're free, all you need to do is register. They're on hiatus at the moment, but they're looking to come back in around about June time. So that would be your speed work session. And then your long run starts at 3 miles. And then you add 10% a week until you get to your target distance. Now, the important thing to think of, if you're actually training for a race itself, so if you're looking at a 5K, 10 miles, marathon, you won't necessarily go up to target distance. And this is particularly important for the people who are looking to go longer. So it's not so bad if you're training for half marathon, because the body can kind of cope with 13 miles generally and recover quite quickly. But once you go beyond training for 3.5 hours, or around about 20 miles, unless you are Paula Radcliffe, what happens is you really struggle to recover from that. And then often that can then start to snowball into injury. So even if a marathon training program might tell you to go and do 20 miles, if you can't cover that 20 miles in 3.5 hours, you stop at 3.5 hours, because that's generally the limit where you are able to cope and recover quickly, or into not being able to cope, and then you get this correlative effect, which inevitably ends up in injury. Does that make sense for everybody? Let me put you back on the screen so I can see you all. There we are.
Sorry, Nikki, could you say that thing about the 3.5 hours again? Just, I think I sort of caught half of it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no worries, mate. So in effect, your body's a really flexible thing and can cope in terms of recovery quite nicely up to about 3.5 hours of exercise. So the next day you'll feel really tired, but it will recover sufficiently so that you can follow your normal training program. So you can go back into your recovery run on a Tuesday, for example. Once you go beyond 3.5 hours, then it finds it much more difficult to make that recovery that it needs to do. So when you go into your training run on Tuesday, actually there's still quite a lot of damage within the body. And what happens is then you start to build on the damage rather than allowing it to recover. And that can then end up in breakdown in the body, leading to injury. The other thing that might happen is that actually you're just too knackered and you can't be bothered. So you get to Tuesday and you think, I'll have another rest day. I'll have another rest day. And then before you know it, you know, your training program actually is just one long run after another and you don't do any of the stuff in the middle. So it's really important that you give your body time to rest. And rest is actually probably, you know, one of the most important disciplines. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. Any questions from anybody so far? Okay, cool. Psychological training.
Psychological training then. Good morning, one and all. So how do we motivate ourselves? That's the hardest question of all. I'm not a psychologist. I've motivated myself to do a little bit. So those of you that got marathon booked, you've got a target race and you can book other target races. I know we can't all run together at the moment, but when it comes back, there'll be target races. You can motivate yourself. You say, I'm going to run this race on this date, and you work backwards with your training plan. You need to think positive about what you're doing. So an old thing was just to put a sticky note on the fridge with what your goal is, where do you want to be, and when do you want to be there. Down at Nick's running shop, we used to have a board, and we used to put on that, I'm going to run X this year. Some people would say, so it's 2020, they were going to run 2,020 miles. And this motivated them. Every time they came to the shop, they looked at it. This was what they were going to do. And be positive. So there are days when it's raining. Frequently in Devon, it's another drizzly day in Devon today. It's windy out there. But if you think positive and you go out and you smile and you drive yourself forward, it's a good way of doing it. We were going to have a coach here today. We'll talk about neuro-linguistic programming, which is a word I can barely say. That's a very similar thing. I'm not an expert in that, but you can talk yourself into it. Your mind's very, very powerful. It's more powerful than you think. It can drive the body a long way. We've both done Ironman, and I've watched people complete Ironman that I would think couldn't even get through the swim or get through the run, because they can think positively about it. There's loads of notes, but I can't really. I've made loads of notes, too many notes. It's the simple things. Put your shoes by the door, you know, get your kit ready the night before, and try and stick to your program. There are times in your program when you're not going to do it. It's not going to happen. Just remember, let it go. Let that go. The next session is always going to be there. And just take it easy. You know, we talk about being more tortoise. It's because taking it easy makes it happy. It makes it a good day out. It's all, you know, there are going to be days it doesn't work. It doesn't work for us, as Nick says. You go out, you walk, you don't feel it. It's not a problem. Tomorrow's another day. You know, we go and with joy to running. There's joy to being out in the fresh air. Someone mentioned felt running earlier. You know, the fact that you can go and enjoy nature, or you can go around where you are and see things you've never seen before because you're on your feet. You know, you're not driving down there in the car. Run down that road, see what's there, look around you. You know, and then the next day, go and do it again. You know, I'm running out of things to say.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. It's an interesting one, isn't it, in terms of motivation, and I've got a link that I'll put into the chat box about intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, and this comes on to what I wanted to talk to you about, that question why. So I said to you at the very beginning, if you had a compelling enough reason in order to be able to run marathon, so you needed to get to the end to whatever, then we can all do it. And often it's finding that motivation, it's finding that reason why. And that becomes particularly important when you are starting to go for longer distances. So for the marathon runners, definitely I would advise both of you to spend a little bit of time at the moment and just sit down and just reflect on the reason why. Now, often with marathon, particularly London, that motivational factor is an extrinsic factor, i.e. outside of your own head. What I mean by that is you're running for charity. So you've got that whole weight of the fundraising, you've got the charity aspect, you've got the fact that you're helping people. And that can be a massively motivating factor. But when you get to kind of week 7 and everything hurts a little bit, and suddenly you've got to go out and do 13 miles and it's raining or it's hot, that motivation can start to sag a little bit. So it's really important then that you've actually got that written down somewhere, like Grant said. So stick it on a post-it note, stick it somewhere you can see it. And that can often then help you get your shoes on. Fundamentally, I want to bring it back to you, and Sue, include you in this, and Kaz, include you in this as well, and you're just starting out your running journey. Putting your shoes on is the most difficult thing that you can do. Once you've got your shoes on, once you've got your kit on, then the whole thing becomes much, much easier. And when you go outside for a run, you never come back thinking, cracky, I wish I'd never done that. You always come back thinking, oh yeah, that was great. No matter, it might not be the best run ever, it might not be your fastest, it might not be your longest, but you will always come back feeling better than when you went out. And that's a fundamental rule of running. Does anybody agree with me there? I'm looking for people to nod. Yeah, okay, brilliant. Not just me, cool. But it's that getting on the shoes. And that's the thing that we're looking at in terms of our motivation. So that question, why are you doing it? It's actually a really important question for you to sit down and consider, because that will be your fundamental basis for putting your shoes on the first time. Those of you that have just started running with the beginners group, so I think Sarah's gone now, or maybe she's doing other stuff in the background, but I'm sure Sarah will attest to this, that the first time she put her shoes on, well, she probably felt quite nervous. By about week 2, everybody kind of feels week 2 and week 3 are kind of quite tricky, because they're in that gap between attaining any fitness, because any fitness that you do is normally on a 2-week lag. So, whatever you do today, you'll get the benefit of 2 or 3 weeks time. So week 2, week 3 are always quite tricky, because you're feeling quite tired, you're not necessarily seeing any benefit. But then by the time you get to week 4, suddenly everything's starting to feel better and make more sense, and things start to slot into place. And that's where that real motivation then starts, because you start to feel better about yourself. You start to see physiologically the reasons why you want to go out and run. So really that motivation that we only need really for a month to get us into a routine. And then you'll see most of the training programs that we looked at just briefly, they kind of have similar runs on similar weeks. So, Monday will always be your recovery run. Sunday generally will be your long, slow run. And it's designed that way so that every Sunday, you know that you've got to go up for a long, slow run, you've got to put your shoes on, you've got to get going. So once the why is the motivation to start, the habit building is the thing that keeps you going. And then from there, then you start to get return on that investment. And you start to feel better. You might start to get a little bit quicker, even if you didn't intend to. Things will feel more comfortable. Does that kind of make sense? So there's no rocket science in this, but actually that why is a really big question, because it's that starts you off. And often when you're doing the long stuff, so Adam and Mike, the why becomes really more important when you're stuck in the middle of it and you can't really see the beginning and you can't really see the end, but you're kind of stuck in the middle of this thing. And that's really important to acknowledge that then. Any questions about motivation? Let me post that link in there so that you've got that. People, it's really interesting in terms of motivation actually. And you see 2 camps in running generally in life. One camp are kind of the camp that want to get faster. And we've got a colleague at work who has actually given up racing because she can't attain the speeds that she used to attain when she was 30. And so actually she's given it up altogether. And so her motivation for the running fast has gone because she can't attain those speeds anymore. But then you also get people who actually, running for them is not about speed. It's about getting outdoors. It's about the mental health benefit, which is huge when you're running, by the way. And it's a very positive side effect that a lot of people don't appreciate, because it gives you that time to get out into nature, gives you that time to have by yourself. And actually in these days where we're all kind of trapped in our houses, that's even more important, just having that space for yourself, even if it's just for 20 minutes to go and run around the block. And so have a look at the motivation thing, because you'll find either you are intrinsically motivated, i.e. that motivation is coming from yourself, and it might be that you want to run quicker, or it might be that you want to run longer, or it might be an extrinsic motivation in that you just want to be outdoors, or maybe you've got a charity element, or maybe you're running with a friend to help a friend and you don't want to let them down. So that's quite a powerful thing in terms of motivation too, is actually, rather than relying on yourself, if you can arrange to meet somebody away from either one of your homes or a cafe when the cafes are open, because that's disastrous. So meet somewhere where there's nothing to get sidetracked, and then run to somewhere where there maybe is once you're done. Otherwise, if you're anything like me, you meet your friend and then you never get out the door because you're too busy yattering. But that's just me. But just have a think about that too. So we've got about 10 minutes left, and actually what I haven't talked about is nutrition. Are any of you interested in nutrition? Oh yeah, good. Okay, so there's a lot of discussion on the internet and everything else about nutrition, and it looks terribly complicated. But there was a lot of kind of around the 70s and 80s, there was a lot of time and money and investment invested in nutritional products, and then you would hear lots of things like isotonic, carb loading, and everything like that. And it's kind of starting to come a little bit full circle again. So there's a lot of products on the market that you can use for nutrition, and there's a kind of a thing with that kind of makes you think, well, if it's there, I should be using it. But I did one of these talks in the shop, and I got a sports nutritionist from the University of Guildford to come along. So I'm sharing his wisdom with you today. And it was his view that you didn't actually need to start using nutritional products until you were running for 2 hours. So if you're not running for longer than 2 hours, then don't worry about it. And a healthy, balanced diet is significantly good enough for you to be able to do what you need to do. You kind of have to be a little bit aware that often when you're running, it will increase your appetite. So you think that you need to eat more than you actually do. And that's actually, I think, probably one of the negative side effects of running, because you feel that you can justify eating that piece of cake and your Frappuccino latte with extra chocolate on the top. But a lot of people, when they're training to run and when they're running, put weight on because they overestimate the amount of nutrition that they need versus the amount of calories that they're burning. The amount of calories that you're burning is a very depressing number, and I'm going to give it to you. So it's generally 100 calories a mile, but you have to take off the calories that you would burn if you were just sat on the couch, which is also quite high. That's normally around about 40 calories. So you kind of have a net gain of around about 60 calories a mile. Now, if you're Kaz and you're on the couch and beginning, our 4.5 miles is suddenly a very paltry, maybe 300 calories. And that's over the whole week. So if you go and have a piece of cake after every run, then you're going to be on a really slippy slope here. So you kind of have to watch that. But it will increase your appetite. So you might need to just tweak your meals to incorporate more bulky foods to help you make you feel fuller for longer. When you're training longer, so when you go beyond that 2 hours, then a lot of it depends on where you get your calories from in the first place. So if you're very carbohydrate dependent in your normal diet, so if you eat potatoes, pasta, rice, bread, and all of those kind of products, then you will need some kind of carbohydrate input when you're running beyond 2 hours. It's a very fine line between what your body can tolerate, what's actually nice to eat, and what your body can process. So in terms of tolerate, I'm talking about digestive problems. And those of you that are familiar with runner's trots will know and understand exactly what I'm talking about. What's actually appetizing is also a kind of quite a tricky one. And the first marathon I ever did, I'd read all about this. I didn't quite know as much as I know today. And I read all about this, and jelly babies were the way to go. And I was going to have a jelly baby a mile. I was going to celebrate each mile, nice jelly baby. I didn't know how to carry these things, so I came up with a great idea. I was going to get one of the washing bag tab things where you put your tab in, put it into the washing machine, get one of them, fill it full of 26 jelly babies. I was going to carry it in my hand because it's got a nice loop to go around the wrist, and off I was going to go. And it was quite a warm day. It started off around about 10 degrees and it ended up somewhere around about 23 degrees. And jelly babies don't do well in a sweaty hand for 26 miles in 23-degree heat. I can tell you that for nothing. But what happened as well is that actually you get to about 18 miles and I never want to see a jelly baby again. And actually, I'm not even convinced I've ever eaten a jelly baby again, because it was just like, these things were just sweet and sugary and horrid. So there's an important lesson in that, is that if you're going to use nutrition, you've got to practice, really, really practice on your long runs to find out whether or not it's going to work for you on race day. So don't ever try anything new. But the other thing is that actually, what I found out is that there was too much sugar in that. So if you are relying on a carbohydrate diet, then you would normally kind of budget around about 100 calories an hour once you start, but you start from 3 miles. So if you're running for 26, budget 100 calories an hour. If you run marathon in 5 hours, that's 5 gels, because gels normally have it between 88 and 100 calories in them. So that's 5 gels, or you know, it can be a mix of things, and you're looking around about 500 calories. After all of these years of doing long distance stuff, my personal preference is to go for real food. So there are lots of things on the market, like gels, like shot blocks, like various bits and pieces, but it's definitely my favorite to go for something that's real and something that's palatable. And because generally when you're running longer distances, you tend to run at a lower level in terms of pace and intensity, you can generally get away with eating a little bit more proper food. And whether that's a kind of coffee and cake stop halfway through, which I'm a big advocate of, having said, you know, about how many calories you're burning, or whether it's taking something like cashew nuts, which have got a nice mix of protein and carbohydrate. I know if you follow Matt Bagwell and Sarah, his nutritionist, who is amazing, by the way, you know, she would advocate the Ultra Jacks that she's created, and that's a recipe that she's created for Matt. And that's all based around real food. So even, you know, nutritionists these days are tending to move towards real food to fuel while you're running, rather than relying on gels, which can get sickly, but also kind of have digestive problems as well. And it's actually quite easy to overdo. So that's for people who are based on a carbohydrate diet. If you're based in a paleo diet, does anybody here do paleo? No, okay. So if you're more of a fat burner, you actually need to take in less calories generally and less carbohydrate, because your body's much more efficient at burning fat. And so actually that can be quite a nice thing if you're looking at running longer. But since none of us are paleo, then I won't go through that too much. Does that kind of answer your nutritional questions? So you don't need to look at it until you're running for longer than 2 hours. If you're running for longer than 2 hours, budget 100 calories an hour, but start early. Start at 3 miles and then just do 100 calories. Practice whatever it is that you're going to be using. They're the most important things in terms of nutrition. And with that kind of practice, those of you that are training for a race, it's really important to practice what you're going to be doing for race day as well. So look at your routine, look at what time you're going to get up, look what time the race is, and practice that. So practice the getting up, practice your breakfast, practice how you're going to get to the race start. Because those of you that are doing London, often you'll get there quite early, and often what will happen is that you might need a second breakfast. Because often you end up, because of all of the road closures, you have to get there for like 7 o'clock. But the race might not start till 10. And then you've got a budget, if you're starting at the back, another 30 minutes to cross the line. And that's the big gap between when you had your breakfast at 4:30, even if it is porridge, between when the race starts. So you might actually need to take a snack with you. Practice that. Practice what you're going to be wearing. Don't do anything new on race day. So make sure that the clothes that you're running in are comfortable. Make sure you're running in a pair of shoes that have been running, and you're not going to use a new pair of shoes, make sure the socks that you're wearing are happy, because it's all those little things when you first start can become really, really big things by the time you're 20 miles in. Does that kind of make sense?
Well,
yeah.
So someone mentioned, to go with nutrition, hydration. Someone mentioned hydration earlier. They're training for London this year. They're going to be training through the summer. I remember I did Brighton a few years ago. It was boiling me hot and they ran out of water on the course. You want to be hydrated. If you're training in the heat, it may be worth getting things like salt tablets to carry with you, because you may run out of salt quite quickly. You'll feel a little dizzy. It's worth taking them. They work quite quickly as well. But don't overdrink. We are tempted when we run to drink a lot of water. It's pretty much dangerous thing you can do. Yeah, carry water, and if you're going to go for longer runs, you can take water out the night before, put it somewhere safe, so you can collect it on the way. You can get camelbacks, you can get running vests with little pockets in the top. But it's worth thinking about that as a part of your training program as well, because you're going to need to drink, but don't gulp lots down, just a little bit every now and then. Thank you, Nick.
That's a really good point. Thank you. Anybody got any questions? Mike?
On my runs that are sort of like over an hour and a half,
yeah,
I get a headache form, and then I think it's dehydration, right? I sweat a lot when I'm running. I think it's dehydration. I ran one marathon before, and I got to, I don't know, about 18 miles, maybe 18, 19 miles. And I had a headache so bad that I basically had to sort of power walk for a few miles, where I was just like, it's crushing. And I thought I took loads of water. I had like a hydration, sort of tailwind, sort of salts and stuff. I don't think I could have drank anymore, but I see it still in training. Anything over an hour and a half.
Okay.
And I don't take water with me when I go on a training run. But anything more than that, and I start to get this headache. Just any thoughts? I suspect it is hydration somehow, but.
So salt depletion can be a contributing factor for headaches when you're running. There are lots of other things that can also cause it, and it's kind of worth, I think, having a chat with the doctor to rule out any. I'm not suggesting that there are by any means. It's a very common problem, but I think it's definitely worth just looking at, blood pressure. If you haven't had your blood pressure taken for a while, getting that checked out. Normally the first thing to try is to look at salt. So assuming that your blood pressure is okay, then what you might need to do is start looking at increasing salt in your diet generally, because what's happened over the years is that we've become less and less, particularly if you're eating normal food, you become less and less salt intake, and that can have an effect. So if you're a low blood pressure person, that can then result in headaches. So I would say get it checked out with your doctor just to make sure that everything's okay, and I'm sure it will absolutely be fine. And then maybe just look at what you're eating and see if there's any way that you can increase salt, and just see if that makes a difference. If not, come back to me and I'll do some more research for you. Okay, cool.